Audio on demand from Vision Christian Media.
Jesus said, "If you hold to my teachings, you are really my disciples. Then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free."
Multitudes have testified to God's power of deliverance from every kind of bondage and addiction. The same power that raised Jesus from the dead is given to the believer, and that power is able to save to the uttermost. However, when Jesus sets a person free, that person has a responsibility to stand in that freedom and not become enslaved again. Now, this includes the responsibility to do all in one's power to avoid an environment in which they will be confronted with temptation in the area that once enslaved them. For example, an alcoholic is free to have a glass of beer if he wants to, but is it wise? The Bible says all things are lawful, but not all things are expedient. A gambler that has been addicted to going to the casino would be wise to go to the casino and place himself under a self-ban from the casino. Somebody that's been addicted to pornography would be wise to cut off their internet account if it needs to be in order for them to stand in the freedom of that which Christ has set them free. Sometimes being a disciple of Jesus calls for ruthless action. Jesus said, if your right hand offends you, cut it off. Obviously, he wasn't talking literally, but there are sometimes drastic steps that we need to take in order to maintain our freedom in Christ.
This is Set Free with Ken Legg.
This week we're looking at the subject of addictive behaviour. It's an important point that Ken just raised. It's one thing to know that God's power is able to save us from the uttermost, but it's another thing altogether to use wisdom and discretion in areas where we're vulnerable. And I guess maybe people thinking, Ken, I'm not addicted to anything, but there are things that we're all susceptible to, isn't there?
Yeah, and we've been talking about that freedom that Christ brings from sin, but that's not a freedom from temptation. As long as we're in this world and in the flesh, we will know temptation, especially in those areas where we've been vulnerable in the past. I heard a story of a monk once that went to an X-rated movie, and sitting there in the movie watching this X-rated movie and says to the devil, why are you tempting me? I'm a monk, why are you tempting me?
Why are you here?
Yeah, exactly. Well, that was his reply. I said, what are you doing in my territory? Why did you walk in here? It, stands to reason. And Peter said something very powerful in his epistle about this very principle. He said, if after they have escaped the pollutions of the world through the knowledge of the Lord and Saviour Jesus Christ, they again become entangled in them and overcome, then the latter end is worse for them than the beginning. He goes on to talk about, a dog returning to his vomit and a pig going back to the mud in which it's been cleansed. And that's a picture of someone that Christ has set free from sin and its addictive power, but they've had the foolishness to go back into those areas and get enslaved again because they should have distanced themselves from those areas,
Yeah. Paul talked about us not receiving the grace of God in vain in one of his epistles. Maybe that's what he was talking about, do you think?
Yeah, definitely.
Grace, it's a wonderful, it's a powerful thing. I've spent a lot of time, particularly over the last couple of years, just trying to get my head around God's grace and how it applies to my life. It is God working in our lives, really. It's not something that we should abuse by flirting with temptation. And as we look at this whole subject of addiction, I'm sure that knowing the truth has a major part to play in someone becoming free. Is that right?
Yeah, I agree with that, Phil. In fact, one of the things that I found helpful in understanding the dynamics of addiction is what some people call the BAR principle, B-A-R. So the BAR principle is based on belief, action, and result. Okay, so I have a belief, it leads me to an action, and it ends with a result. That's a bar. Now, each time I repeat the process, I erect another bar in my life. Now, Phil, what do we call a room that's full of bars? A prison, right?
I thought you'd say a bar room.
A bar room, of course you would, yeah. But, that's the way it works. We repeat actions and certain behavioural lifestyle things, practices, I should say, and before we realise it, we're in a prison. Now, in order to change the process, we've got to start with changing our beliefs. For example, someone that has anorexia, okay, they might have the belief that their identity is actually based on the approval that they get from other people. That's their belief. So now I'm not saying that that's the cause of every case of anorexia, but I'm just saying this particular person might have that basic belief that, okay, that's where my worth comes from people approving me, and my approval is based upon my appearance. And so they get consumed with what their body shape is like, and that's what's going to then lead to actions, and it will end, of course, with results. Or take someone that's got a sex addiction. Okay, they've got a belief, well, God made me with these needs, and these needs need to be fulfilled. Now, that's a belief, but it's a wrong belief. It's a partially correct belief. But God has created us sexually and with needs, but those needs are meant to be met within the confines of a marriage relationship. So people keep repeating their actions because their beliefs are set. And that's the thing that needs to be addressed.
It sounds like that's a real fundamental thing to understanding the cycle of addiction and also how to then break out of that. If that's the case, then, as I mentioned earlier, it's the truth that sets us free. It was the words of Jesus, after all. You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. Is that how you see it? Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. You see, the problem is that we repeat cycles because we change what we do instead of changing what we believe.
Yeah.
Let me give
that's a good point.
Let me give an illustration of that. Let's say somebody's brought up in a home where, it's a very poor home. They didn't have much financially, always struggled, and this person has many sad memories of their upbringing, and they sort of associated the two. They said, okay, I had a very unhappy upbringing because we didn't have much money. That's not going to be how it is in my home. I'm going to make sure we have plenty of money. So, this person gets married, has a family, and then he works 2 jobs and his wife's working. And over the process of time, they realize, hey, we're not seeing each other. I don't get to see my kids often. This is not the quality of life that I really wanted. Now, instead of changing what he believes, he changes his actions. So he says, there's got to be another way to get money. So he stops working 2 jobs and he gets caught up in one of these get-rich-quick schemes, one of these scams. And so he gets his fingers burnt there. It's a very painful experience, but he still holds on to this belief that at the root of my happiness is get more money. So he ends up going to the casino, tries to gamble his way into prosperity so that he can bring bags of money home and, his family can have whatever he wants or whatever they want. So basically what he's doing all the time is changing what he's doing instead of changing what he should be believing.
It's so common. We do that all the time where I think we want to just take the shortcut. We see the actions, but we don't see the underlying cause. And you're so right. We need to change our beliefs.
Yeah. Now, you take that thing then about, his belief that money is the key to happiness. Now, of course, we know that that's not the case. But let's just look at a couple of verses from Timothy. Okay, let's see what Paul said to Timothy about this. Paul says that there is a doctrine that was going around then, and of course is going around now, which says that godliness is a means of gain. In other words, your Christian life is a means to get rich. And he says, from such people turn away. He says, that's not where, godliness leads to. In fact, he says, godliness with contentment is great gain.
No, I don't see any money in there anywhere.
No. In fact, he's saying, hey, look, if you lead a godly life and you're content with the good things in life and with that, the fact of your relationship with God and so on, there's great gain in that. Now, this guy, he was thinking that in our little illustration, if I can get lots of more money, there's great gain in that. That's where quality of life is at. But he was losing his quality of life because he had a wrong belief. Now, Paul goes on to say in this passage, he kind of really, just shoots right through that whole premise of this guy. He says, the love of money is the root of all evil. This guy thought money is the root of all happiness. But Paul says, actually, the love of money is the root of all evil, every kind of evil. And he goes on to warn in this passage. He says, command those who are rich in this present age not to be haughty and not to trust in uncertain riches, but in the living God. See, that's the whole thing about money, is that people end up putting their trust in it and it lets them down. And so Paul was saying, hey, that's not where to put your trust in. So getting back to our illustration, this guy had some very, very wrong beliefs, and that was actually what was feeding his actions, which became addictive behavior, ending in the results. So the way to address the problem is at the core belief area. As you said, you know the truth, and the truth will set you free.
We hope this discussion on addictive behaviour has been helpful for you today, and we'll have more tomorrow. Until then, remember, you don't have to carry that baggage. God wants you to be set free.
Find articles and more set-free podcasts in the free Vision Christian Media app or at vision.org.au.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this audio on demand from Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, go to vision.org.au.